We are outside of the Garrett building, and we have a 1929 Ford AA Garrett truck owned by Treon Mardonis. He bought this in 1994 at the last Garrett get-together, and he restored it partially, and it is out here today seeing the sun for the first time in a long time. Over here we have a 1963 International Emeryville DCO 405 owned by Rory Quell, and we brought this home from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho last summer, and it had been sitting in a barn for over 8 years until it saw the sun. And this is a 1948 Williamson trailer owned by Ryan Port. We just picked this up this summer, and it has not been driven for quite a while, but it is out doing its maiden voyage again. Both these were Pocatello equipments, and I'm sure at one time these two had been together, but this trailer was in service here at Garrett until 1967, and this truck, we know it was here in 1967 also by our records. You can see this trailer is a little bit rough, but she's still together and working just fine. Here's the other side of the 29. She is pretty. And while we're out here, we're in front of the main Garrett office buildings. And of course, can't do that without a little picture of that. The neon no longer works, but the sign is still present up there. And down there, that building there is the Garrett Freight Terminal, now being used by a couple other truck lines, but it is still in use as a cross-dock. As we walk into the Garrett facility, here's the sign that Rory Quill made for this get-together. It is lit. Right now you can't see it because of the sun, but it is a two-sided replica. There we go. We can see it lit there. Here's a display board of Ryan Ports. And these are all the different pictures of Garrett. Here's the delivering it. ISU, Max Carey drove those trailers up there. First Street Warehouse, Garrett Way. Here's an aerial of the Garrett complex here. And all the shop. Yeah, pictures all throughout the shop building here. The tire shop, service and engine service bays. There's the wash bay. There we go. I love this one, him sitting inside of that thing. This is the display that we have going on for Garrett Days.
In his last wreck, he killed the guy or what from Vegas to Mesquite. And the highway guys were out there working, and I guess he really was a little drunk and plowed into him. Oh, really? But when I was here, there's 4 or 5 tractors in the back fence that were just all, for wrecks.
This collection belongs to Rory and Tammy Quell.
That trailer was back there then.
Oh, really?
And these books are just full of Garrett memorabilia of all sorts. And this one here is all pictures, and terminal pictures of all the different places. This logbook is a complete logbook of one of the Pocatello drivers.
May that we hauled back our rents with.
All the different matchbooks.
Yeah, they're still in business? Oh, yeah, okay, cause today.
This belt has all his service pins
I seen one
on the
all
belt,
day.
along with the hat badge
The stencil is on.
on there.
I haven't seen one all day, you know? And
That's a
and then
cigarette
I
case
seen
with a
one, but it was
lighter.
parked somewhere, and I couldn't tell if it was on the road or something. Yeah. You gotta pay it, yeah, okay, cause I don't, you know, I did some business with them all back or whatever.
This board also has Garrett stuff, or Cotant stuff on it, because Garrett Freightlines bought Cotant in one of their mergers.
You ever deal with RLT out of Reading number?
Those are all the terminals and points served by Garrett.
For trailers to Garrett Freightlines.
Yeah, I remember you sent me a
Yeah,
message.
yeah, that's right.
This collection here is by Robert Myers. This truck, set on Clarence's desk, was painted by the paint shop and was then given to children and recovered and put back into Robert Myers' collection.
With each other, and they all went under the name of Freightways, and it was a win-win situation. The companies made more money because they didn't have so many backhauls, and
Yeah, go say Freightlines.
everybody got better service.
This here
And they all
is an
charged the
aerial
same
photo
price. They set themselves up,
of
all
where the
companies
different
charged the
things
same
were.
price, and the government says, come in and said,
There's the paint shop, the shop building where the reefer repair was, the tire shop, the diesel, the repair, service, and engine repair.
that we're in the Freightways system.
There was the gatehouse.
Everything, or
Yeah.
just,
All their
Back there was the
trucks
fuel
had
island.
Freightways on them for a while.
The railroad
It
was
wasn't
set
very
up
long.
right next to the warehouse because at one point they wanted to do rail travel on them.
Fixing your own prices.
The warehouse or the OS&D building.
No matter.
There's the freight terminal
It don't matter if you're
and the main offices. The computer room was back there, and all of the secretaries and dispatch and everything. This next collection is belongs to the daughter of Larry Alsbury. Her name is Patty Bollinger, and this is
Garrett.
her father's, the last of her father's collection here.
Yeah. When A&R, and that's the thing that really.
These are the voting trust records for his voting rights.
Garrett was the one that.
His personalized folder. A group of the Garrett board.
And did emergency.
50th anniversary letters.
Up their whole area is Garrett.
Sounds like
Because they
yellow.
had the most assets as well.
And Larry was also one of the chief Pocatello board. And he's right there with the Garrett green and yellow colors. And his headdress. And the banner. This belongs to the Ryan Port collection. This here's the rest of Ryan Port's collection. He's got some, he does a lot of models, and his father, Steve Port, cleaned out the Garrett building. So a lot of this stuff is from when the building was cleaned out, and it has been handed down to Ryan. He's preserved a lot of this. Here's a model Ryan's actually built for his son. There's just a lot of stuff that Ryan's built over the years from his dad's collection. His father, Steve Port, had done a Garrett thing back in 1994. And there he is right there. And there's Robert Myers, who has the rest of the collection. And these gentlemen had put on a Garrett display in '94, and it's kind of cool that we're doing this again with the same stuff that was displayed back then. There's all the tablets they had. 50-year celebration.
They tried that scheme for a little bit.
These little cartoons were in the newsletters. This here, you're not going to be able to see real well, but it's a blueprints for a 20-foot long, or 27-foot trailer from Pike that was found in the Garrett stuff.
So now I'm gonna go after I drop the kids off. I'm gonna go get
And
it.
over here we have
Driver shows up early.
a door from a 1929 Ford AA that was brought to the 1994 show.
You won't miss it.
And there is Steve Port with the truck, and it was in the newspaper. And here's a picture of Ryan when he was little in front of the truck sitting on a trailer. And right there is Ryan next to the same truck that has been partially restored by Treon Mardonis. And that truck will be outside. And there's a picture of the door that he saved. And we are lucky enough to have that here today with the original Garrett transfer and storage on there. So that kind of dates it. Here we just have the jackets that used to be worn. And we have binders upon binders of pictures and papers and all that wonderful stuff. So we've been able to fill quite a bit in this room. We have a video that we'll be playing tomorrow that was made by Steve Port. One thing I did forget to show over here was this wonderful cap. The drivers used to wear these, and the hat badges on those. But there's lots of miles and lots of sweat in those things. And one last thing that we have going on is this: in the Garrett building there is a permanent display of the things that have been donated to the Kirkhams, who own this building now. Throughout the years, things have been donated and given to him, and they honor the Garrett name by displaying this stuff. This was Dale Kirkham. He was the one who bought the Garrett building, and his sons now have it and help to still display this stuff to this day. There's another one of the hat badges. That one has all the safety pins on it. But it's really nice that they're continuing with the legacy of honoring the Garrett. There's the old warehouse down on First Street.
Go in the car and get buckled.
And an old seat, and this board here was part of the truck that was on the top of the gatehouse, and it was donated back.
Clarence was talking to him, and they burned a lot hotter, and so they put one in a truck. Long story short, they put one in a truck, and they claim to be one of the first to develop the diesel motor for the trucking industry. Kenworth laughed at them and said they would never see a diesel engine in a truck. And now Cummins is one of the biggest producers of the diesel engines right now in the States.
Sure, and Clarence really worked with Cummins to develop that, develop that end of things to make sure that's gonna work in the truck.
And
What's the story about the oil
the oil.
in the trucks in St. George? Running that cheese down to LA?
I don't remember.
Okay, back in the day, because the engines, the engine oil, we didn't have the multiple viscosity oils that we have today, a 30-40 weight. They'd leave out of here with a lighter weight oil because of the cold. The oil would be too thick. They'd get down to St. George. They had a pit stop there where they would drain their oil and put in a heavier weight oil to handle the heat to go down to Los Angeles. So on the way back, they would stop, drain out the oil, put the old oil back in, and away they went again. So that's kind of a cool little. You don't have to do that today. But anyway.
And on that trip, they Clarence was in the passenger seat, and the mechanic put the engine and was in the driver's seat. So whenever they were developing stuff, Clarence was right there. He didn't just put guys out to do it. He was right there. He wanted to be in it. There's another story in one of their sales guy was in Mackey reading the paper, and he, what's that, or that copper mine up there, Blackbird, something like that, up by Salmon.
Yeah.
There's a gold mine up there, there was, and they needed someone to haul the ore down to Utah, and nobody would do it because it was in a remote area. They didn't want to get trucks in there, and so Clarence, salesman said, let's contact them, let's figure out what we can do. And so they developed these trailers. Williamson Manufacturing helped them develop these trailers, open top trailers. I had a picture, I can't remember where I put it now, of it. And so the first year, they got the contract from the mine, and the first year they hauled everything to build the city of Cobalt, Idaho. And they hauled, you know, furniture, wood, all that kind of stuff up there. And then when they got the town built, they started doing the mine. They started taking the ore, and they could only load 7 inches of the trailer because the ore was so heavy. And they got the first load down to Utah, and it was solid as a rock inside. So they developed steam heaters they put on the bottom of the trailer to heat the trailer up. And then they figured, well, how do we unload these things now? And there was a ram, like a dump truck, but on the fifth wheel of the trailer, or the truck, and it would lift the trailer up. And so for 3 years, they hauled all this down there, and then the contract was over. They had these trailers. Well, Simplot out here in Pocatello needed sulfur hauled to Durango, Colorado, so they put those trailers on that. And I was told that out there in Durango, there was a lettuce producer that needed his crates hauled from LA. They were built in LA, hauled over to Durango, but they wouldn't order the crates until they knew how much product they had. So they got with Garrett, and every time they had a shipment of crates, they'd call them and there'd be a truck there. They'd be back the next day. That's how his customers, he knew, were what made his company, so he did whatever it took to please his customers in a, you know, and looking at his equipment, there's this trifold back here. We have found equipment around the area that still look like it's, you know, the age of it, it's still pretty well built. These pieces out here, that 1948 trailer that we have, it's
Also Williamson.
It's a Williamson, yeah. For being 1948, it's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, Garrett's did a lot of business with Williamson down in Salt Lake City where we're out of, right?
They're still there, they build dump
They're
trailers.
still building trailers today, so, again,
And
nice little
then
development.
in 1963, they had their golden year. That was their 50th anniversary, and they had a big party here in Pocatello. I guess let me go back. This facility was built in 1952.
Yes.
Sorry. And it
Their
was,
original facility, you see pictures of it out there, was down on First Street. We believe that was their original terminal. I don't know what they did before. That was built in 1937. And slowly was built around them as they were working. They had an open dock out there, and then they built it to cover it in between. So, and then in 1952, they built this facility, and it was the Cadillac.
it was strategically placed here because Pocatello was on the other side of the tracks. And so here they were out of congestion. And then this cost $800,000, wasn't it?
It was 5 or 6.
Okay.
I know there's numbers, it depends on which article you're reading the paper. It went from 5 to 8.
But it was a state-of-the-art place. They had their original computer system was in this back room you'll see on the tour, and it was just a room. And then when the computers got bigger, because they could do other stuff, the building back behind us was built for a computer, and there was no windows in it, right? It was all
Yeah, it was sealed
off.
off. IBM did not want any, when IBM came in and put it in, they said, we don't want this building to be compromised in any way. It needs to stay completely clean or they'd have computer glitches. So,
Like, you don't have leak ducts or anything, it had to be kept cool.
Yep.
Had to be kept cool.
And they had a paint shop. This shop right here you'll see on the east side was heated by hot water on the floors, so it had floor heat for his mechanics. He said in a paper or an article I read that if his mechanics were miserable, his trucks wouldn't get worked on the proper way, so he took care of his mechanics. They had a tire shop, and so after a truck would hit so many miles, no matter where it was in this area, I don't know how far they would haul them from, but they'd come in here, tear it all down, and rebuild it. They'd repaint it. When Garrett would buy trucks, let's say they bought 10, there was no warranty on them, he wouldn't buy the warranty, and they'd buy an extra warranty. And so it was called a swing motor. So they'd be able to throw it in another truck, and they had a motor always out, they were rebuilding. And he got his warranty through parts. And there was, PIE did the same thing. And so every so many miles, they'd have a brand new truck, practically. The trucks were very well maintained, what I was told by employees, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and it shows, the truck out front here, you can see, that's a Survivor. All it's had really done to it is the gentleman who owned it before me put paint on it, to freshen it up. But that is a surviving Garrett truck, and you can see, you know, everything that was done to it through the years, you know, when they've modified this, that, and the other. So, yeah, the fact that it still is going down the road today is a testament to how they took care of things.
And there's stories when they were driving over Donner, those trucks didn't have air conditioning, obviously. And so the guys would take a block of wood and wedge it in between they put it in first gear or whatever gear they were in, probably first climbing that hill. Wedge the block in on the fuel pedal, and then stand out on the floorboards, or on the running boards to cool down. And then sleeper teams, you have a guy in the back of the trailer, or the back of the truck sleeping, another guy driving. If the guy had to use the bathroom as he was driving, he would get his shoes on, crawl out of the truck, go do his thing in the trees, and then walk back up to the truck as he's climbing up the hill.
Else you walk out on the hood.
But, you know, and this trailer we have out here, we put, you'll see on the bottom there's a rack that you can put spare tires in. When you blew a tire out on the road, you didn't call somebody, you changed it. And we were trying to dig the tires out yesterday, and you can only imagine a guy that weighs 130 pounds getting that tire out, jacking that trailer up and getting the tires changed out.
Yeah.
You know, you tell a guy today and he'd tell you to pound sand and walk away.
Tires, we interviewed J.O. Cotant, and a few years back when we did this, and he was saying that the biggest problem that they had back in the early years on their runs was tires. He says the tires were just garbage back then. They hadn't developed them the way they have now. They were the biased, and you'd go on a trip and you'd plan on eating 2 or 3 tires before you got where you were going. So they had strategic spots
Down
along
the
the way.
pass, until the interstate system went in the late 60s.
There's a 2-lane.
You should have seen Donner Pass. I mean, it was, even in a regular car, you went down that thing with your eyeballs this big and hanging on for dear life.
I had a friend that used to haul livestock to San Francisco,
Yeah.
and he'd tell me stories about climbing Donner, and it was closed one day
I
because
mean,
of snow.
the one that's on there now is like nothing. We just kicked back and that's, go over that thing, but that old one, it was like this all the way down, and it was only 2 lanes, and it dropped off 500
Right.
feet. And,
Right, he was telling me a story. The road was closed and had a little shack out front, and the driver walked in front of him and started yelling at the guy and took off. He's like, "Well, we gotta go." Walks up there. He's like, "What's going on? Well, the road's closed." Well, how did that guy get to go through? Well, he told me he was gonna punch me, and it's just not worth it. He goes, "Well, I'm gonna go save it. Get out of here." You know, back in those days, you were able to get away with stuff like that.
And you were on your own. You went out there. Good luck to you.
And during the 50s, Garrett had a lot of equipment, and they had a lot of equipment spread all over the place. They ran all the way out to St. Paul, Minnesota. They had sleeper teams that go all the way out there, and the company started developing a thing called Interline, where they would load a trailer in New York, and they would take it, interstate systems would load it in New York, take it to St. Paul if it was coming out this way, drop it in Garrett's yard, Garrett would pick it up, and then take it all the way back over here.
We had room right back in.
Oh, yeah. So this was Garrett's area that they ran in. And then he had other companies that were down south and on the East Coast, and he even went up into Canada. He had companies up there that he would interline with. And he was able to ship coast to coast back then. And there's a paper trail I was following that a guy at a law firm out of Delaware wanted to buy Garrett and Systems and make them one company, because they would have been a monster and they would have been the elite company, and Garrett said no. He goes, "I'll keep doing business with them, but I'm not gonna buy them." And there's a story The guy's name slipped my mind. He was Garrett, it was CA's right-hand man. I cannot remember his name. His daughter contacted me a couple years ago. I cannot remember his name for the life of me now. Clarence went in to his office and he goes, we're going to DuBois. They had a ranch up in DuBois, a cattle ranch. And he goes, we're going to the cabin. You gotta go up there. And Clarence was just down. He just wasn't himself. Moped around the whole day. Well, that next morning, I cannot remember his name. It's bugging me. What his name is? Lawrence? No.
Is it Ralph Wallace?
No.
Is it Bill Wilson?
No. I cannot remember. It'll come to me tonight.
Call me.
And the next morning he woke up to bacon and eggs, and Garrett was singing he was singing in the kitchen, and he walked in, he goes, okay, what's going on? You're moping around. He goes, Leland James, the owner of CF, contacted me, and he said he wanted to buy the company. He gave me a number that Dorothy, his wife, Dorothy Garrett, we could live peacefully in retirement, but I will not do that to my family in Pocatello. And he had Navajo Freightlines. They tried to buy Garrett. There's actually another paper trail that they're kind of bickering back and forth. And then Garrett helped reconfigure the converter gear. It's called dolly that hooks the trailers together. He helped develop that. And they're bickering back and forth. And then one of them, I saw another letter in the middle of this. Oh, by the way, we heard you guys develop this dolly. Can you send one up to us and we can get measurements of it? And the next letter was no, in all capital letters. Sent that all the way across on a telegraph, whatever it was called again. And so he had a lot of people that were eyeing him, I guess you'd say, because of the way he would develop things. He was told that if somebody produced something for the trucking industry or the shipping world, they knew they could contact CA. He would listen to their sales pitch, and then he would try it, and he would go all out. And as the company got bigger, the shipments, they had so much to ship, Clarence got looking that you could hook 3 trailers together. He was able, did all the math. It was the legal length limit, all that kind of stuff, weights. And so he got with the state of Idaho, and he was able to get the set of triples. He was the pioneer of the set of triples. And actually the first set of triples left here. There's video on the DVD. The first set left here, and it went down Garrett Way, down here, and I think it went off on Pole Line and around on Cedar. But then it came back, and then went under the railroad bridge, and made a U-turn and come back here. The Clarence was in there, in a car behind it. The governor of Idaho, I think a senator was in there. And
Yeah, there were representatives from Oregon, Idaho, I'm trying to remember where all Tracy said, I think Nevada had somebody up here too, to make sure that it could be done safely, because they knew if it happened here, it was gonna happen there.
And the guy that first pulled them, he's not here right now.
Tracy Watson.
Tracy Watson, he's gonna be coming later on. And that DVD that we have for sale, it actually has the first set, or it has, my dad had the film of it. It's not very high quality, it was made in the 60s. The camera guy's going like this. But
He was pulling that with a 1964 Emeryville, 1 year newer than the one out there, sleeper truck. And we were able to get a picture of him in front of that Emeryville out there, a real cool moment, so.
Picked the whole truck up without the tractor.
Right.
And swing it into the building. And I got looking at the strong back that they were gonna pick it up with, and it was just held together by weld joints. And I said, well, I don't want you to pick that truck up because I was gonna be in it. I don't want you picking that truck up with that, so I took the truck and went back to the yard, and the next day went back up, and they had a strong back that was all constructed right. And they picked the whole trailer up and swung it into the building, and I and a couple other guys was in it, the wind was blowing. It blew that at an angle off the building, and you look down, and don't have a hairy job, but anyway, I was in that truck.
oh, you were in the trailer too? Wow.
Yeah, that's a great story. So I'd love to hear those.
Before the tour, I need to do something. You wanna?
Sure.
You guys wanna just, tell stories right now? I got some I wanna do real fast. If you, I turn it to you.
Yeah, so
Anybody else have anything that they remember specifically working for Garrett's, that, you know, anything that you did that you're like, wow, that was really cool, or later you went, oh, I'm glad I made it out of that situation. Myself as a driver, I've been in situations doing deliveries where you're close to this or close to that, and you get out and you go, whoo, that was close, you know, or even line haul. Any of y'all ever done anything that you're just like, oh, that was, anything there? How about you, Max? Are there any other stories that you're like, this was?
Well, not that I can think of.
Not that you can think of, but that's a pretty iconic picture of that thing up there in the dormitory. I can't even imagine just you know, the feeling.
I know I helped deliver to the mini dome, and they built the mini dome.
Sure.
Put all stuff in. Associated Foods over here, when it was all under construction, I hauled stuff into there. The mall over here, the mall, you know,
The Westwood Mall?
Westwood Mall. I hauled a lot of stuff in there when they were building that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I used to think, you know, that, you know, being a truck driver wasn't anything too important. When I started in 1954, and when you look back, what people like us done was very important. We helped build Pocatello from a small town. Pocatello used to be a bedroom city in Salt Lake.
Yep.
And we helped build this whole town.
Yep. Tumbleweed to the temple.
It's very, very, very important to this town. Garrett Freightlines is very important to this town.
Absolutely. So you worked there?
Yeah, and my dad had the paint shop,
Oh, okay. Terrific.
and then the paint shop and tire shop and the 3 bays on the far south building. And the world had come out with these porta walls you got on your Chrysler and your Cadillacs. And CA thought those porta walls were pretty cool.
Yeah.
Dad says, oh, you really like that? Well, that picture shows he got out the white paint and the brush and painted the white walls on the tires. So we had the only white wall fleet on the road.
The only white wall? And that's actually just painted on there.
Yeah.
That's
That's
terrific.
all that is paint.
And I suppose as it faded off, you could tell when your tires were actually
Phoenix?
Oh, okay. When he was the painter later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do believe we're going to be able to go into that shop area. I don't know how far
About a
in
year
there.
since I was in there.
But yeah, it's kind of cool. So if you have any stories when you
Pete
go in there.
Hernandez and Charlie Ortega had the tires shop, and Anderson had the, just do a roll call. Anybody know T-Bird?
Yeah, anybody know
Bill
T-Bird?
Conrad? Hey, boy, where you at?
Yeah. So now, how long have each one of you that worked at Garrett's, how long did you work there?
No, I just worked the labor of cross docks
Oh, okay.
when we were kids.
No.
What's that? She wasn't here, we did the race of hands.
Oh, and how many were working?
Yeah, can we get a raise of hands at who worked at Garrett again? So, 3, 4, 5.
And now how many parents? Like,
How many people's parents worked it? Where you didn't?
Yeah.
Terrific. That's kind of cool how this goes down through the generations and people remember. I can tell you before we do this, I drive that truck around town. We went to breakfast one morning. Like, hey, you know what? Some of the other tractor trucks, you know, they'll meet up at a restaurant. Let's take ours down to the restaurant. We go down there. It took us 30 minutes to get from the parking lot to the door. Just literally, we were swarmed by 6 or 8 people. Oh, my parents worked there, whatever. So this is cool. So
Go ahead with this now.
Yeah.
Okay, I got something special here. Sean Watson, his dad, Tracy, contacted me over a year ago to build this, and things just kind of went chaos. But Tracy celebrated his 97th birthday a couple weeks ago, and for your birthday, I want to give you this. It's a replica of the first of the triples we pulled.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can put on the table if you want until you take off. I couldn't find a case long enough for it, so. But everything was painted. The trailer started out as white, and this is all risen. material on the tractor. So this is for you, and happy late birthday.
Thank you.
So other than that, that's really somebody to haul their luggage from the train station to their house. And he got thinking, you know, I can make money doing that. And so that's how he started. Eventually he hauled people as well and their luggage, and eventually hauling luggage and freight paid more than hauling people, and the luggage and freight didn't yell at him, so he went that direction. Him and his brother took the first trip to Brigham City, Utah. It took 44 hours to get there in their old truck. They were moving somebody, and they were loading the truck up, and Clarence tells a story where he picked up some linen, some sheets, and hauled it to the truck, and the woman started screaming, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" And he didn't think anything of it. And all of a sudden the sheets started crying. The baby was taking a nap on the bed.
You said 44 hours to Salt Lake for that first delivery?
Mm-hmm.
One way?
One way.
So another 44 back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Keep in mind, back then, the roads were not improved. These were basically glorified wagon trails in a lot of places. So anytime it rained, those hard rubber tires.
I don't remember the
So-
late teens, early 20s. Mm-hmm. By 1918, 1920, they had about 10, 15 trucks, and they were running overnight freight from here to Idaho Falls and back. Thinking about overnight freight 45 miles away. But that was big back in those days. They used to haul grain from American Falls, and there's a story that they were going out there and they got stuck quite a bit. And they got stuck in front of a service station, and this guy goes, "I know a guy that has a tractor, he can pull you out, let's give him a call." So he came and charged him $3 in the 1920s, that's a lot of money. And he hooked onto him and pulled him out, and Clarence, you know, "Thank you, I don't know how to thank you," and he goes, "Give me a job." That guy worked for 30 years for Clarence. He actually, when they started the terminal in LA, he went down there, and that was where he finished off with his retirement.
Just curious, how many people here who work for Garrett, how many were 10-year employees?
What?
For how many worked for Garrett for 10 years or more? You work for 9? So, yeah, we're getting to the point where people who worked there 40 years are no longer with us, and so that's one of the reasons we wanted to do.
But when they hauled grain out to American Falls, they improvised, and they found a solution that took 4 or 3 guys for a truck. And they'd drive out there, and they had 2x6s. It got really muddy, they'd put the 2x6 in front of the tires and run over it. And the other guy's job was to grab the other one and put it up front, and grab the other one. It took 2 guys to do that while the other guy was driving. And some of the things they did back in them days just amazed me. You know, I drive truck, Rory drives truck, and you know, you pull a tire, you wait for a tire guy. Nowadays, if you have that trailer out there, there's a rack underneath that spare tires go under. It took 2 of us to get those tires out of there last night. You have a guy that weighs 130 pounds pulling that tire out and then changing that tire. It just amazes me, the stuff that they did. And the thing about Clarence, especially in the early years, he was right there doing it too. He wasn't just sitting in the office collecting money. There's a story up in, what was that? St. Anthony, that shop, that steel shop that I was telling you about.
Insane?
Yeah,
Steel shop would be there. Are we talking
metal
about
shop.
Parker's?
Yeah,
Parker's.
he needed overnight freight from Pocatello.
Before him,
Yeah, they needed overnight freight from Pocatello. So Clarence was the only one that would man a person to run that up there to St. Anthony's. And just thinking about the roads would have just been amazing to me. Then they eventually kind of branched out and, you know, hit Burley, Chalice, Boise, Payette. Back in the day, that was a layover run, it's called, where driver would drive to Payette, then go to a hotel, take his time off, get back in the truck and come back. Nowadays, you could make that turn in one day. So in 1935, they pioneered the first refrigerated system that goes on the front of trailers nowadays that keeps the trailers cool. They had a load of cheese they were hauling from Idaho Falls to Los Angeles. And so they put ice blocks in and a fan and blew the cool air on the cheese. And that's how they hauled it. And back then, this area produced a lot of cheese with Kraft. And so Garrett, he needed, back in those days, you couldn't just jump in a truck and start driving down the road. You had to have authority to run different points in the United States. And he needed authority to run through Nevada. But he couldn't get it. I don't know the details why it took so long for Garrett to get it. And so while he was trying to get authority, he made a totally different company called Orange Transportation. And they would haul cheese. And it was one of those back in the time, company owner couldn't make another trucking company without, you know, government permission and all that. So he ran this under the radar. And he, there was another trucking company here in Pocatello called Pocatello Garrett Freightlines. And they had all the authority to run down there because they were hauling cheese down there already. So he bought them for $100,000. What year was it again?
In 1947.
And when they bought that, the government found out about Orange Transportation, that he was connected to it. So he made him sell this so he could buy that. And so this was sold to Pacific Intermountain Express, PIE. And that's how they came back to this side of the country. So with that,
A little side story.
and bigger, and they needed a bigger facility. So in '52, well, I think they started construction in 1951,
Yeah.
when this facility was
Opened in
built.
52.
This was the state-of-the-art facility. It was the biggest of its kind in this area, and it was strategically put here because Pocatello was on the other side of the tracks.
Mhm.
There was houses over here and stuff, but it wasn't, you know, the industrial stuff that they load on the trailers. And so in the mornings or during the night, they'd unload the trailers that came in and load the freight for the morning. And then in the afternoons, when the freight came in, they'd unload those off the trailers and put them on their designated trailers that were going to Portland, Seattle, you know, all of that kind of stuff.
Even that in and of itself was an innovation. They had, in the center of it, they had a guard shack that was up top, or control center, and they had a carousel system that went all the way around this, where there was, you know, chains and hooks that would just go around and around and around the dock, and they'd load up the cart, so you had a cart with something going from, you know, Pocatello to Portland. They'd take it off the P&D trailer, put it on the cart, roll it over and hook it to the chain, and it would just go around in a circle till it got to the Portland area. They'd unhook the cart, roll it in there, and that was before you used pallet jacks and forklifts. You just didn't do it. They didn't, you know.
And then Larry Ellsbury, he was the last president of the company. His daughter was here earlier, and I was on the tour with them. And she said later on they didn't unhook those carts because it was safety and whatnot. So they had a button they'd have to push, stop it. Guy would unload the cart real fast, and then keep it going.
Mhm.
And when she was a little girl, when everything was, you know, closed down for the night, her dad would bring her back, and she would ride on the carousel over the track.
Another innovation on that, and we just went in there and toured it on the walking tour, but there are some lines that run across to the doghouse. You know, the bank tubes you go in and you use, they had a system quite like that, where they shot paperwork back and forth from the offices that were up top. The offices that were up top, oh, sorry, from down here. The offices up the top to the doghouse up in the middle, so they could transfer paper without sending somebody across the dock to carry the paperwork down, so it's kind of cool.
Then the drivers never touched the paperwork until they got to the gate. When they come out of the gate, they were given their paperwork, P&D or line haul drivers. When they got to the guard shack, they'd hand their paperwork, bring their sets in and drop them where they wanted them to. And then it was the hostler, yard truck. It was his job to unhook the sets and unhook the trailers and take them to the different doors. It's still in today, the union, where if that driver unhooked his trailer, but decided I'm gonna break up my set, unhook my set to help the guy out, that guy could say, oh, that was my work. So he could file a grievance and get that guy in trouble. And the money that that guy was supposed to make, because he unhooked his own set, that guy was given the money. It's just a whole, but the union, I guess, according to her, the union was pretty strong here in Pocatello. So, and then here you got your shop. The tire shop was right in here, and they also did engine rebuilds. I have pictures of them guys working on chains. What was that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I thought you said something, sorry.
Someone coughed on
Oh,
it. I do have a question after you finish.
Okay, they rebuilt chains, they rebuilt, when Garrett would order 10 trucks, they'd have an extra motor ordered. And they wouldn't order any warranties. There's no warranties on the trucks. They did it through their parts. So he needed injectors. He could turn those in for a warranty because they rebuilt everything. When a truck hit so many miles, they got pulled in, stripped down, repainted, rebuilt, and back on the road again. So it was almost a brand new truck. Well, it really was a brand new truck. So anyway, what was your question?
When did they put that fancy automobile on the top in the front?
That was in the, I think it was when this was
First.
built.
That's the
1960s, what the picture.
60? Okay. That's not the original automobile.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where,
Kirkham's put that new one
where's
up
the, I
in
don't know where
the
they happened to the original one.
I don't know.
I don't remember what happened. That was just a mock.
That one in
Is it
Kirkland's
still
building.
Oh, is that the one in the building over
Oh, that's
there?
what,
Oh,
That's what Rich said.
okay.
oh, is that, I didn't realize that TT
I
was
didn't
the one
realize
that
it.
rebuilt, so, yes, and you can still see it through the windows down there, so.
And then the rest of the shop was, you know, trucks, and whatnot. The shop was heated by hot water. Not heated, sorry, the floors were heated by hot water. And I think they heated the shop with it, from what Rich was saying.
Well, it was to heat the shop and the floor.
Yeah, so they used the steam to wash them, or to wash them, to heat them, sorry. And I heard that with Clarence said if his mechanics are comfortable and happy, his trucks are gonna get repaired, and repaired properly, is what I was told. And then here you have the wash bay was right in here, you had a dyno room, and then a paint shop.
And who had a dyno room in 1952?
They-
Dynometer is to measure the horsepower of the truck, so.
So they'd hook it up and then run the truck like it's going down the highway, and the tires would be spinning, you're doing like 70 miles an hour, and they'd be gating, and those trucks wouldn't go 70, but
Mhm.
they'd be seeing how much horsepower that truck was putting out to make sure that everything was running right on that truck. Rich Kirkham was telling us that dyno was so embedded in the floor, they finally just put concrete over it. They couldn't get it all out. The paint shop had yellow and green walls because of the paint, because of painting the trucks. So it was this was very strategically designed, and then in those days they even got more equipment. I have a paper that talks about hiring a guy, and that's all he was taking care of equipment to figure out where it's at, make sure they're using the trailers and not just sending out empty trailers, and they got so much equipment or so much freight that Clarence got the thought of, hey, we can add a third trailer to our sets of doubles. And he got with the state of Idaho, and they actually did a test. It's on this video. They did a road test, and they came out on Garrett Way with a set of triples. The man that drove that truck was here earlier. His name is Tracy Watson. He's 97 years old, and he went down Garrett Way, and I think he went out on pole line, if I remember right, and came back around by where Ted's Automotive used to be, back onto Garrett Way, and under the Garrett Bridge, or not the Garrett Bridge, the railroad bridge, and turned around and came back. And he had, behind him, there was the head of state police, there was the governor, senators from a couple states.
Oregon and Nevada had representatives there to make sure this could be done safely. He told me that he went over to Boise on the first trip that he took, went over to Boise with triples. And of course, back then you didn't have the freeway all the way, you know, through these little towns. They took triples over, and the next day he came back with Rocky Mountain doubles. If you know what that is, it's I think at the time it was 45 foot and a 20 foot. And when he came back, he couldn't make the corner on one of the intersections And so they allowed triples, but they wouldn't allow the Rocky Sale. Kind of interesting.
And then, I don't know what year that was. I've tried so hard to figure out.
It was around 67-ish.
I think it was 66. But
It was a 64 Emeryville, much like you see out here is a 63 that's bit pulled. So it was 64 to somewhere in there.
in 1963, they had their 50th anniversary. It was a pretty big deal. We actually have Clarence's personal invitation is right here. And then Larry Ellsbury, his daughter brought his. And they handed these out to customers. They got trucks painted, make sure all the trucks look nice, you know, in the yard for this party. And here are his flashcards from his speech that he gave. And in 1962, they operated a total of 35,360,191 miles, their whole system. And only 12,472 of that was highway miles. So that's a lot of city miles. And I see this a lot. He had this quote, do without things to have money. Now we do without money to have things. We Garretts did without both money and things to have trucks. So,
Now imagine all those miles at 50 miles an hour maximum.
and Garrett, they did whatever it took for their customers. And if somebody would give him a sales pitch and he liked it, he ran with it. There was a salesperson that was in Mackey reading the paper, and I was gonna look up that mine and forgot we were on the tour. It's called the Black Hawk Gold Mine or something like that up by Salmon. And you know what, I'm gonna do it, but he had to take a trip to LA. He went to LA and he said, when I come back, I'm gonna sign that over to do that. He came home, Larry Ellsbury, he wasn't at work. CA didn't show up that morning. Larry called, no answer. He drove over there, and CA was dead in his bed. Dorothy, his wife, was out of town, and they figured he had a heart attack because he was the day before he was dealing with unions in Los Angeles. But he was going to sign over for the employees to buy more stock in the company to make it an employee-owned company, and they think today Garrett would still be around if that happened. And in the 70s, they had different presidents. I think it was for 10 years they couldn't do anything with the company. It was in the bylaws, they couldn't sell it, they couldn't anything. And then in 1984 they sold to A&R Freight, which was 3 or 4 companies together. And then sadly they closed the place up. And so that's kind of the spill I got. I know it's not kind of out there. I hope it was, but anybody has stories or comments?
We do have the inevitable when it comes to truck driving.
Oh, no. I'm supposed to. Tammy, do you want to introduce?
Back of the trailer in front of it. So it pulled like that, which in turn added extra weight to these 2 axles in back, or single axle, whichever the case might be.
So instead of on a regular dolly, it was actually
instead of on a dolly, it sit on the back of the trailer.
Let's say use one of these.
We had quite a few of the truckers, it didn't have
Yeah, I
that.
didn't have one of these.
Yeah, we had quite a few of the people decided they wanted to pull a B train. So they would come out, we would go out and measure the distances, and we'd tell them what the extra weight here they had to do to get weight further on the back. They could slide the back axle forward, the front axle forward. They could slide the pin forward and back in this 5th wheel to help regulate the weight. This is something that, few stories I've got. I got a lot of stories about it, what went on. There was a guy came out of Utah in the dead of winter, got up as far as McCammon, decided, hey, I am just under 1,000 pounds overweight on that axle. I'm not gonna go through the port of entry and get a ticket. So he took that exit and came on the old highway up in the dead of winter. snow. He got stuck. He called the wrecker. The wrecker said it's gonna be a couple, 3 hours before I can get there, I'm that far behind. The wrecker came out and pulled him out and said, there is a spot right up here, about a quarter of a mile, turn around and go back because you can't get through. He said, okay. The wrecker left, the guy got in the truck and headed up the road. He went past the turnaround place, and went a little ways farther and got stuck again. He called the wrecker, and the wrecker said, didn't I just pull you out? And he said, well, yes. And he says, okay. He says, do you have blankets? You might be there all night because I'm that far behind. Had he done what he was supposed to have been, and had he also known, hey, Idaho had 1,000-pound tolerance, so it would have been illegal to come through the port. It's a warning from us. He sat down there. Another driver came through, went to Idaho Falls, backed into the potato cellar up there at 4:45. And the guys in there were cleaning up and putting their clean clothes on. They were going home. They said, hey, we're not gonna unload you tonight. And the guy said, it's Friday. And they said, exactly. And they all went home. And he parked it in their lot. Saturday, he slept about half the day in the truck. Sunday, he slept about half the day in the truck. Monday morning, he backed into the dock at straight up 8 o'clock. They got him loaded. He went out and got in the truck. Now, he'd been sitting there since at 5 o'clock Friday night. He went out and got in his truck and headed south. Didn't go very far, and he got to the port of entry. The officer in there called him in because he was a little bit overweight, and he wanted to see if the guy could get in and shift some of the bagged potatoes to the back or front. And he said, I need to see your logbook. I don't have one. Well, how do I know where you have been then for the last 2 days? He said, I've been sitting in the trailer up here waiting to load. He said, prove it. Park it right there. Here's your ticket, the logbook. So he pulled over and he parked for 8 hours. Got in the truck and headed south to the port of entry. I happened to be working. He had not moved any of the weight. He did not slide his fifth wheel or anything to get the weight distributed like it should have been. He did not have a logbook. I wrote him a citation for no logbook, and I said, park it right there for 8 hours. Here, since Friday night, he had driven a total of 60 miles and parked for 16. And he said, I'm headed for Wyoming. How long is it going to take me to get there? And I said, that depends on how many police officers there is between here and there. He said, a week? And I said, possibly. Because if you don't have a logbook, they're going to park you for 8 hours. And I said, I guarantee you, any state police officer will park you for 8 hours. He went out and just about tore the inside of that truck apart. He came back in. Lo and behold, he had a logbook in his hand for a company that he had driven for 3 years. And he said, if I scratch out their name and put this one in, would you accept this? Hey, I'm a nice guy. I said, yes, I will. So he stood right there, scratched out the name of the other company and wrote in who he was working for now. And he said, where do you want me to start? And I said, Friday night at 5 o'clock. So Friday night at 5 o'clock, parked for the night because I couldn't done. Saturday parked all day, Sunday parked all day. Monday morning, drove 5 miles to port of entry, got stopped and a citation and sat for 8 hours. Got back in and drove 50 miles, stopped, citation for the logbook, and parked for 8 hours. And I read everything down there. Sounded like what, all right, you know, proved he hadn't been driving for over 10 hours. So I told him, go ahead and go. Now, see, I'm a nice guy. I'm not a horrible monster deal guy. This uniform has a silver badge which indicates 20 years. The badge I had when I retired after 27 years was gold, which represented supervisor. I served 5 years in the port of entry up by east out of Coeur d'Alene. They were building Interstate 90, going up over the 4th of July Pass. Okay, that port of entry up there had been a building for over 100 years, but I ran that one for 5 years. One day I went out there and got in my company pickup, drove up over the hill into the Department of Transportation headquarters office in Coeur d'Alene. And I got a hold of the head engineer. I said, I've got a question. He says, what's that? I said, well, a suggestion, question, a suggestion. I said, how many people do you know of, truck drivers, that have been seriously injured and killed trying to take the chains off of the right, or off the left-hand wheels of that outfit because they are sitting on the highway? There is no place for them to get off the road. You've got places all over the state to put chains on, but there is nowhere for them to take them off. My golly, why didn't somebody think of that before? So they were in the process of building the Interstate 90 complete over the pass. The next time I went over, here was all the equipment on the south side of the highway, eastbound, digging up and planting and putting in, and they made a chain removal area. Across from my port of entry, they made a chain removal area. So if you went this way, you stopped at the port of entry, put your chains on, went over the pass, pulled over and took them off. If you're coming this way, you stopped there, put your chains on, came over, pulled across from me and took them off. That was the first chain removal area in the United States. This was the second chain removal area in the United States. I have no idea how many injuries or how many lives that by itself has saved. You know? Like I say, some of you might recognize me from going through the port out there when I was gone. But some of you, of course, well, I retired in 1990. So.
I got a question for you. You were out of Ecom, right, for a little while?
What?
The Ecom port?
Yes, I worked out here at this port for over 22 years total.
So my dad worked for IML. They just shut down. They were hauling the equipment to Salt Lake. He came into the terminal here, and there was a bunch of 45-foot trailers and 28-foot trailers. So they're empty. So he hooked two 45s and a 28 across the Ecom port. And the guy walked out and stopped him, and he goes, "I'm not overweight." He goes, "You're overlength." He goes, "Drop that box. I don't want to fill out the paperwork." I wonder if it was you.
Was it me?
I don't know. I wonder if it was.
There were a lot of the people that did come out and ask us to help them figure, even just on a semi-trailer or a pull trailer that they were wanting to reconfigure to get the maximum. What would happen? It's only got one axle in the back. If I put a second axle in the back, that means I can add extra thousands of pounds. And I said, no, you can't. Because that axle is going to weigh several thousand pounds. You got to add that to the weight of what you already have. Oh, they hadn't thought of the details. You know, they hadn't thought of. But a lot of that, like I say, we were monsters. We had a job to do. You guys had a job to do, and they were in direct conflict. But we had to get along. So.
On that note, can I say, being a driver, there have been plenty of DOT officers that I've worked with, and I very much appreciate that they're really good to work with, like you said. There was one up there to, well, I won't say where, because I went up to Montana, and I knew the truck I had didn't have permits to pull triples in Montana. So I stopped and I asked, and I said, hey, where can I get a permit? Well, we don't sell them here, and the guy at the port in Montana had passed away, so they weren't running that, and he says, well, not sure. He says, but you know what we say here? I said, what's that? He says, we say so many right-of-way trucks, so little time. And I said, are you telling me not to get a permit? He said, so many right-of-way trucks, so little time. I thought you'd get a kick out of that story.
One thing that I want to add on that, Garrett Freightlines was among the top truck lines that we never had a problem with. They ran legal weight, they ran legal drivers, and that brings up another point. Joe Blow wants to drive a truck, and he's only had 3 accidents in the last 3 years. But he doesn't want this prospective company to know that. He manages to look around and find a letterhead from a defunct truck line. And he said, oh, I worked for these guys for 7 years, never had an accident. Oh, you guys don't know that, and there's no way you can prove it, because there's nothing left. Okay, go to work tomorrow. Next week, he has another accident. So, there have been, unfortunately, all of you guys that have been on the road with, especially with an empty set of doubles, know about the wind gusts at Portland Gap. You can be driving down the road, no problem. I rode a motorcycle back and forth to work. Outrun the state police, by the way, on it. That year they got rid of their motorcycle cops on the highway. We went down to Income, took that off ramp, and came back up. I crossed the cattle guard. And just after I got across, I heard something behind me, and I looked in my mirror and here's state police on their big Harley behind me. He pulled up beside me and he says, last one to the port has to buy the coffee. Don't spread that around. We don't know that. I hit the gear shift with my foot, cranked the throttle wide open, the front wheel on my bike came up about that high. Came back down and then back up. I was in the port of entry, had 2 cups of coffee poured when he walked in the door. And he said, I thought that was a 350. And I said, it is. And he went into town to talk to the captain, and he said he was outrun by a 350. So they pulled all of the state police motorcycles off the highway at that time because they weren't fast enough. Anyway, going through the Portland Gap, you're driving along in nice, beautiful, sunny, calm weather, and you get to Portland Gap, and you get halfway around, and there's a 40-mile-an-hour wind, and fog, and snow or rain, and off the road you go. I have got a picture at home of a Garrett Freightlines laying on his side, just 3/4 of the way around the turn of Portland Gap. The winds had blown him off the road. Just, like I said, driving in beautiful sunny weather, that can happen to pickup pulling camp trailers. It can happen to an empty truck. It can happen to a car. I came home from work one day on my bike, and I told you how fast it'd go. And I was down in 3rd gear instead of 5th, running at 40 miles an hour, wide open, which I should have been doing 90. Going through that wind, bucking that wind. My bike was leaning like that. Well, I guess I don't have to run to get to the door. But like I say, my uniform, I worked down here for 20 years, transferred to Coeur d'Alene. Oh, and when the Coeur d'Alene and Idaho went together, Idaho and Montana went together and built a port at Hagen, Montana. They sent all of their officers over, and I trained all of them in the Idaho laws that they would be enforcing over there. I went over to Hagen and helped minor little details on the design and stuff. It was the first port of entry, I think, in the United States that was in the median. So the trucks went off and then back, and then off and back, scaled on both sides of the building. And we went to Canada to a port of entry up there and did basically the same thing, examined everything, looked at it, and came back to put in those ideas in some of our ports in Idaho. So, anybody have a question, maybe they can answer.
Well, thank you for coming and sharing your stories. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gerald.
I've got this has been hanging in my garage since I retired, and I thought, my kids, when I kick the bucket, they're not gonna know what to do with it. So I'm gonna bring it down, and I talked to Tammy, and she said yes, that they wanted it. I have at home shoulder patches. As soon as I can find them, they're out in the garage from probably 20 different truck lanes that operated in this part of the United States.
Wow.
I'm going to bring those down and give them to Tammy as soon as I can find them. Yeah, go ahead.